Donovan Cooks Burgoyne was born in 1901. In 1916 he had an accident with a shotgun. This resulted in the amputation of his left hand and limited mobility in his right. In spite of disability, Burgoyne went on to become an expert woodworker. Always interested in flying, in the mid-1930s he inevitably built a flea. As to be expected, the flea was built to a high standard and powered by a Scott two-stroke engine. Another flea had been built locally by Mr. Mottram. He and Burgoyne approached a local farmer, Mr. Tallis, at Windmill Farm, and rented a field at Packwood, where they erected a small hangar. The field was about 350 yards long, and after a lot of taxi trials, each time getting faster and faster, Burgoyne got airborne. Things didn't quite go to plan, Burgoyne finishing upside down in the far hedge. He was badly shaken, but otherwise unhurt. The flea was only superficially damaged. Mottram, seeing his friend's misfortune, decided not to attempt flying from a small field. Instead, he moved his flea to Bonnickson's aerodrome at Leamington Spa, but it made no difference because he crashed anyway. Burgoyne repaired his flea. It also moved to Leamington Spa, where on the 10th of May 1936 it also crashed. In 1935, Horace Everett was taught to fly by Major Bonnickson. The Everett family owned Knoll Hall and most of the surrounding estate, and in 1937 opened a landing ground. Don Burgoyne was commissioned to build 2 hangars, one for Horace Everett and another for Mr. Jeffson, who was married to an Everett and owned an early Moth. 2 hangars became 3 hangars, as Everett agreed to Burgoyne moving on to the airstrip as well. In June 1938, Burgoyne bought a damaged BAC drone. The Coventry Air Training Group also sold him their ground trainer for £8. The ground trainer was a flightless BAC drone powered by a Ford 10 car engine. The ground trainer mimicked, with varying degrees of realism, the different phases of flight, and by the end of 1938, Burgoyne considered himself to be quite proficient in the thing. He then bought an airworthy drone and flew it most successfully. Not content with 2 drones, he bought 2 more from Humphrey Dimmock at Ely, in total owning 7. A good friend of Burgoyne's was Alfred Green, a cabinet maker from Warwick. In 1937 he bought the Dart Pup, a one-off monoplane pusher from Zander and Vale, but the following summer wrote it off in a take-off accident. Burgoyne bought the wrecked Pup for £10 and later sold Green a repaired BAC drone. In early 1938, Burgoyne and Green travelled to the winding-up sale of the Aeronautical Corporation of Great Britain at Peterborough, Green purchasing a Walter Micron engine. The engine was intended for the Dali monoplane, a one-off single-seater being constructed by Burgoyne. The aircraft was being engineered to Burgoyne's usual high standard, and the undercarriage oleos were ingeniously adapted from Scott motorcycle front forks. The wings, originally to have been scratch-built, were instead adapted from the outer wing panels of a damaged Clem monoplane. By September 1939, construction was well advanced, but the war stopped further progress for the time being. Alfred Green, some 15 years younger than Burgoyne, was desperate to fly for his country. He applied to join the RAF, but was turned down on account of having fallen arches, that is, flat feet, and poor eyesight. He then applied to join the Air Transport Auxiliary, but was turned down on his first attempt. Major Bonnickson wrote a reference on his behalf, and finally, in 1941, he was accepted into the ATA. Green completed his training in October 1941, but in December of the same year, he was killed whilst ferrying a Hawker Hurricane from Dumfries to Cardiff. The landing ground at Knoll Hall remained open throughout the Second World War. Another hangar was erected, and Burgoyne kept busy repairing gliders for Air Training Corps units throughout the Midlands. In 1945, the engineless Dali monoplane was sold to Flying Officer Howard Stirling. Stirling was considerably older than his rank suggested. A veteran of the First World War, he was employed as Senior Air Traffic Control Officer at nearby RAF Honolly. He obtained an Aeronca E113 engine, possibly from the unidentified Aeronca C3 used as an instructional airframe by the Knoll Hall Air Training Corps. By 1948, the Dali monoplane was complete, with cowled engine, and trousered undercarriage like a Miles Hawke. Stirling named the aircraft the Burgoyne-Sterling Dicer and generally flew it within the confines of Honolulu Aerodrome. The Aeronca engine was both shorter and lighter than the proposed Micron, and a fair amount of lead had to be bolted to the firewall to bring the centre of gravity forward again. These photographs were taken in 1948 by Peter Wright, who also made a sketch of the instrument panel. Note on the right there's a starter button. There's no evidence to suggest that Stirling fitted a starter or a battery to the E113, although it would have been possible, and probably more use than the lead ballast. It was probably Stirling's joke, as was the registration. Being that of Burgoyne's pre-war flea, Burgoyne was not amused. The Dicer, attractive though it was delightfully illegal for the whole of its existence. It followed its owner to RAF Wymswold, and was last seen in 1955, strung up in a barn in Houghton-on-the-Hill near Leicester. Don Burgoyne continued to build, rebuild and repair gliders for the rest of his working life. He retired in the 1960s and died in 1980. Thank you for watching.